Hello, and welcome to the Thyroid Warrior podcast. I'm Ebony, and I'm here as your wellness facilitator. I'm going to be sharing my experiences in managing Hashimoto's disease, and I really hope that it'll help you on your personal journey. Keep in mind, however, this does not substitute as medical advice. It is only for your information and motivational purposes only. Now, let's get started. Hello, friends. So, we have been talking about grief and touching on just a lot of what I've been experiencing, but I also want to really do a deep dive into a lot of the documents and other information that I have found to be incredibly important throughout this time. And this is going to be a longer episode, so definitely take some notes. Make sure that you come back to different parts of the episode that may be helpful for you, because this one is really important. And it is a big reason why I will be updating my health journal with all of this information in detail, because it's that important to me. So, I have spoken at length about being your own healthcare advocate, speaking up for yourself, but sometimes there will come a time where you either have to depend on someone else to help you, or you're acting as an advocate for someone else. And it's going to be very important to have a conversation about living wills, advanced directives, healthcare proxy, and making sure that you have someone and people that you trust in your life to help you make these different types of medical decisions. So I really want to go in depth about these things, as I've mentioned before. So when we think about living wills or advanced directives, what am I talking about? Those things are written instructions or some type of legal document that indicates what your choices are as it relates to medical care if you cannot make a decision for yourself. And basically, these advanced directives are put in place to help your advocate, caregiver, medical team figure out what to do if you become really sick, or if you get a really bad injury, or if you are in a coma and you have, let's say, dementia or some type of altered mental state, and you cannot make decisions for yourself, or if you're, especially in my case, towards the end of your life. And I want to put something in your mind in terms of this needs to happen regardless of whether or not you're older. Everyone needs to have a conversation, no matter how difficult it is, about these things, because this is really important. And we often see people fighting about, well, this person didn't want to be revived. Well, yes, they did. And I know what they meant because they talked to me. This makes it a lot easier to not necessarily avoid those types of altercations, because sometimes it will just happen. It's inevitable. But I would argue that you want to have as many systems in place to make it seamless. So what you want to do is figure out who your caregiver may be in the event that any of these things happen. Who do you want to be a healthcare proxy or a healthcare agent for you? And sometimes that could be a person in your family. Sometimes you want it outside of your family, because a lot of times you're going to be grieving, you're going to be stressed out, you're not going to be thinking straight when it comes to all these things. So you want to have a serious sit down with someone or people in your life, and I always say to have this conversation with more than one person, and have it with someone in and outside of your family for the reason I just mentioned. Trust me, you want to have more than one person that is aware of your needs. I'm going to just go ahead and say this too. Please make sure that someone else knows the passwords to your electronic devices, your phones, your computer, your passcodes, garage doors, key fobs, openers, gates. Where are all those things? Write it down. Have pictures. Make sure that people know what are all the things that you have, your bank accounts, uh, any type of business that you have. If people were coming to the house, write all of that down, especially if you have a lot going on and you, let's say you're doing renovations in your home, make sure that your family or someone knows who all those people are so that you don't have random people coming to the house and you're like, I don't know who you are. Why are you here? What do you mean I have to pay this bill? I don't even know who you are. So that was just a random aside that I needed to throw in there because that too is also important. I also want to add a caveat in here that Apple, and I'm not sure about Android, I'm sure they have that or have this, but you have the ability to set up a legacy contact so that if something were to happen to you, you would get a key, essentially like a generated code that you would take to Apple with the death certificate so that you could get the contents off of that person's computer from an iCloud account perspective. But I also want to encourage you to make sure that you have the computer password because those M1 processors in the Apple computer are amazing for security, just not so much so when you don't have the password. And no, they won't give it to you, even though the person has died. Just, um, don't say I didn't warn you. But that was another tangent, but an important one as well. So back to advanced directives. So basically, what you want to figure out is who is going to be that person that will be able to make those decisions if you cannot do that. In some states, it can be called a healthcare agent, a proxy, a representative, a patient advocate. You can have power of attorney, durable power of attorney. All of those are different variances of the type of person that can help you make those decisions. In some cases, you also want to have your documents notarized, and you also can look up a lawyer that can work with you on these things, but it varies from state to state. So you really want to make sure that you have that information written down and documented. I personally like to do written down, notarized, and a video copy when that person is not incapacitated because you'll be able to have those conversations with that person. Of course, asking for consent to record said things, but in the event that you have a lot going on or you have things in the house, it can be a lot easier to categorize things from a video versus if someone just wrote it down or if they didn't type it up. So, when you think about a living will, again, similar to advanced directives, but you really want to think about those medical decisions. So, do you want your organs donated? What kind of pain management do you want? Do you want to be resuscitated through CPR? Do you want to be on a ventilator? Do you want to be fed through a feeding tube? Do you want dialysis? Because sometimes you could be in a horrible car accident and your kidneys might be punctured. They may not be able to function on their own, or you may have some virus or sudden onset of a disease that starts to shut your organs down, and your care team will need to be able to either help you through dialysis, help you with a ventilator, give you different types of antibiotics. Especially, this is going to be really important if you're traveling to another country, any type of antiviral. All of those things are going to be important. And you also want to think about palliative care. So, if you do have a terminal illness, what do you want to happen? Do you want to be on medication? Do you want to have a PCA pump or a morphine drip? What kind of pain medicine do you want? How do you, like, a lot of people can get dry mouth or cold sores, or do you want to have invasive procedures? Do you want radiation? Again, do you want to donate your organs? Do you not want to be intubated, meaning having a breathing tube put down your throat, or resuscitated? Those are very important decisions. And not to mention, if you have any cultural considerations that should be taken into account, you want to make sure those things are written down, because your care team may not always know. And some hospitals have the ability to, for example, contact spiritual care so that they can figure out if, for example, you even documented your religious practices in your medical record. Sometimes you don't. Again, it's another reason why you want to write these things down, because what I would hate to happen is you were supposed to have some type of rite or ceremony at the onset of your passing, or if you get really ill, or even according to said religious practices, if certain things are supposed to happen when you're in the hospital, you just want to make sure those things are considered. And I do not want you to be in a spot where these things aren't honored because you didn't know that you could have these things or that those things were important. And when it comes to creating these things, you want to make sure you keep them in a safe space. You want to give a copy to your care team everywhere you go, whatever doctor or provider you see. You want to make sure that they have a copy of that. And you also want to make sure, again, that you have some type of documentation in your wallet, your pocketbook, something that indicates where your advance directives are or what you want done. And I have had this happen because my mom had a situation a couple years ago where I was in New York and I had to get called Michigan to get an EMS truck because she had an allergic reaction to an antibiotic, which she could no longer speak. And I literally had her put my information in her lap before she was unable to speak. I had her go to the door. I had her put all her medication on her lap, put my phone number and a note that said to call me because I was her healthcare proxy. So you want to make sure that you have that readily available, and know that also sometimes your choices change. So if you're diagnosed with something else, if you get married or divorced or separated, and honestly, I would say every 7 to 10 years, you also want to review this because things change. And in some states, in addition to advanced care directives, you may be asked about a POLST form, which is a physician orders for life-sustaining treatment form. So you may, it could be a post or a MOLST, MOLST, or medical orders for life-sustaining treatment. So this type of form comes into play if you have already been diagnosed with some type of serious or terminal illness, and it doesn't replace your other advanced directives, but whatever treatment that you want to have happen, that is what that is for. So Depending on your state, you want to make sure you have a conversation with your doctor about what that entails or what that will look like for you so that you can have whatever information was in your advance directives be added to that post form. And if, for example, you're in the hospital or let's say you're in a nursing home or what have you, they put it in your chart or they attach it to your bed. But again, it depends on what state you're in. It depends on your acuity or how sick you are. And when it comes to what's in this post form, again, antibiotics, it's similar to advanced directives, but antibiotics, if you want to be resuscitated, be on a ventilator, if you, whatever type of pain management you want, if you want to go to the ER, if you don't want to be admitted to the hospital, all of those things are going to be extremely important to make sure that you document. And the other thing that I also want to touch briefly on, and I'm going a mile a minute because I have everything written down that I wanted to talk to you about, but if you have the ability to also have some type of will or trust established, please do so. I know a lot of times we can't always do that, but if you have any type of belongings that are of sentimental value, write down that information and indicate who you want that to go to and make sure you get it notarized, if nothing else. Because sometimes there's a lot to go through, it's a lot to think about, but you do not want to leave room for unmet needs, unmet expectations, for fighting, for anything like that. As much as you can have taken care of, from a will to a trust to life insurance, all of those things are so important. And I personally think that if you can look up term versus whole life insurance, I encourage you to do so, especially when it comes to your 401k, 403b, whatever it is. I'm right now, I am going to start the research process to create a trust for myself as it relates to my nephew or my nieces or my goddaughters or my future godchildren, so that whatever I have or whatever I end up leaving to them, it will be able to go into that trust. And again, it makes it so much easier for their parents to be able to manage that versus me just passing away and making everyone figure that out. But I have been forced to think about all of these things because of what happened with my dad, but also it's just good practice, especially if you have a business. Write all that stuff down. Make sure you have a succession plan. Even when it comes to social media, what do you want to do with that? I know Facebook has a way for you to kind of memorialize yourself or have someone else manage it, but all of those things are so important. In addition to, again, knowing what subscription services do you have, what do you pay for on a regular basis, who comes to do work, so that you know to start canceling that stuff, because you would be surprised as to how many people start popping up all of a sudden when you or a loved one passes on, and you just want to have a clear idea of what's happening. And I would say just the final thing to wrap this up too is get in the habit of walking through these things, updating your passwords, making sure that someone else knows what's going on. And please don't let your pride or your fear of the unknown stop you from either making sure you're protected or your loved ones are protected, because you just don't want to get in a situation where no one knows what to do because you didn't want to have those hard conversations. And yes, it is hard. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, something is going to inevitably go wrong in the path of communicating. But again, you want to try. So this was all a lot. It's a lot to think about. But the more that you provide a means to secure yourself, to secure your family, and to have those conversations, the better off you will be. And I also want to encourage you to make sure that you're having conversations in a way that is understandable for the people that you love, especially when it comes to children. So, with that being said, I just want to let you know that you are not alone. I know some days this grief feels like just a stream, and other days it feels like an enormous tsunami that is just going to consume me and I'm not going to be able to do anything else. But what I'm learning is there are people that want to love you and people that want to be there for you and support you. And I highly encourage you to take that on. So I think I'm going to stop here when it comes to talking about grief and this process. But I want to also have a brief conversation about how to talk to your children about health things, and we'll have our special guests kind of go into that. But also, I want to go back to talking about how do we how do we get ourselves back together, because I'm finding that there is so much going on when it comes to people's health, and so many people that I know are being diagnosed left and right with additional autoimmune conditions or not being well. I myself have been struggling for the last couple months with having back-to-back ear infections. And I want to go back and revisit some of those health conversations that we were having before, because I think it's about that time, especially to refresh, as I've refreshed my knowledge on some things. I want to be able to share that with you. So, with that, friends, be happy, be whole, and be well. Take care.
Okay, thyroid warriors, get out there and take things one step at a time. Remember, reflect on your triumphs, know that you are doing your best, and do what you need to do in order to be well. I would absolutely love it if you subscribe to this podcast and share this episode with a friend. And don't forget, leave me a review. I read those and try very hard to improve the show based upon your feedback. So I'd love to hear from you. And with that, be happy, be whole, and be well. Take care.